Call of the Bully, Chapter 20. My lips are sealed. The next morning, after breakfast, Mr. Periwinkle met my cabin mates and me down by the dock. "Okay, boys," he began. "I suppose now Rodney has filled you in on the canoe race and what's at stake." Everyone nodded. "Good. Now, let me explain the race. Each boys' cabin has to put one canoe team into the event. That means 12 cabins will have a canoe in the race. Each year we have a winning team, but this year, even if we don't come in first, we have to finish ahead of the Algonquins." "Who won last year?" Stinky asked. "The Algonquins." "But how about the year before that?" Thorin asked. "The Algonquins." How about look, they've won for the last 20 years or more. Let's not dwell on minor details, okay? Back to the race. It takes 2 days. You will canoe all day Saturday on the Drown-A-Lot River, camp out on Skull Rock, and finish the race on Sunday. The team that finishes first on Saturday will have a head start Sunday morning. If you finish 10 minutes off the pace Saturday, you have to wait 10 minutes Sunday morning. Make sense? Any questions so far?" Josh raised his hand. "Yes, Josh?" "What's a canoe?" No one answered. What could we say? I finally pointed to a canoe floating next to the dock. Josh walked over and examined it. "That's a boat." "A canoe is a boat," I explained. Mr. Periwinkle shook his head from side to side. Eventually his gaze returned to the rest of us. "Where was I? Oh, yes. The canoe always has 2 paddlers and a person sitting in the middle. I've given some thought to who should be on our team. Rodney, you're a no-brainer. We already know what kind of boatman you are. I assume a sailing champion can handle one of these." My stomach tightened. Mr. Periwinkle scanned the lot of us. "Who else?" "Thorin, what do you know about being out on the lake?" Thorin stepped forward. "I know. The Lady of the Lake rose from the waters and gave King Arthur." He lifted both arms in the air for effect. "Excalibur!" Mr. Periwinkle's smile lingered strangely for a moment. "That's wonderful. Now why don't you go wait over there?" He pointed inland, away from the dock. "Fernando, do you think you're up to the race?" Fernando smiled and nodded. "Mr. Periwinkle, Fernando has many talents. Tell me, how many women will be at this Skull Rock?" Mr. Periwinkle gave a nervous giggle. "Maybe you could keep Thorin company." He looked at Stinky, who wasn't listening. His attention seemed occupied by whatever lay deep within his nose. Mr. Periwinkle flinched. Josh was still staring at the canoe. Mr. Periwinkle walked over next to him and looked down. "Handling a canoe can be tough, my boy. Do you have any experience?" Josh punched his fist into his palm. "I can handle anything." "Can you paddle?" Josh turned to him and practically yelled, "I can paddle, punch, bash, maul, crunch, punch, bash, punch, punch." "I think we found our man." Mr. Periwinkle turned back to the rest of us. "This year, there's been a change of rules. You see, in order for Camp Wyoming to avoid a Title IX lawsuit," at the mention of the word lawsuit, he gave a little shiver, "there must be a third person in the canoe, and that person must be one of the girls from camp." Fernando left Thorin and hovered near Mr. Periwinkle with renewed attention. Periwinkle continued, "I believe this is a distinct advantage for us. You see, I've noticed that one of you is quite gifted when it comes to courting ladies. Some call it a gift, some fools call it a curse. I don't know why things are the way they are. But ever since Fernando was a little niño, Mr. Periwinkle interrupted. "I'm sorry, Fernando. This is a busy week, and the speeches will have to wait. As I was saying, young Rodney here holds the interest of a girl who knows boats and the water. You know who I'm referring to, right, Rodney?" I knew, but after her comments at the cotillion dinner, I wasn't so sure I could count on Tabitha to join our team. I didn't say anything. Periwinkle added, "We need Tabitha, and her boating skills, Rodney. With her on board, we'll have an excellent shot at winning. In fact, it's probably our best chance. Now, everyone off to your next activity." The pressure was on, and it wasn't even 9:30 in the morning. This was going to be some day. News of the race and the bet had traveled throughout the camp. Most people no longer saw us as the losers. We, and especially yours truly, were the saviors of the forest and defenders of the lake and the knights of all things good. If I wanted, I could have been carried around that week in an Adirondack chair or even a canoe. You'd think I would have enjoyed all the attention. But to be honest, there's nothing comforting about everyone depending on you when you know the truth, that you're only going to let them down. Right after my meeting with Mr. Periwinkle, on my way to Arts and Crafts, was when I first noticed the attention. Countless people patted me on the back and wished me good luck. As I walked along, even the birds seemed to sing more, and the insects bite less. But when the bushes bordering the soccer field said, "Beat those jerks, Rodney," my throat ran dry, and I strongly considered a visit to the camp infirmary for a psych evaluation. Before I went, I remembered what my aunt used to tell me: "Madness is no excuse for bad manners." I answered, "Thank you, Mr. Bush." Survival Steve's head popped out from between the bushes. "Mr. Bush, what are you going on about? Rodney, do you know Vanderdick is planning to turn my shack into a Starbucks?" I pictured a cappuccino machine with antlers. "Are you listening, Rodney?" "Sure." "Well, I know quite a bit about canoes. Built myself one once." "Did you make it out of moose skin and bear bones?" "Nope, I used advanced polymer fiberglass. I've taken that canoe down the Snake River, the Mohawk River, the Rio Grande, and the Colorado. You bring your team down to the canoe beach tomorrow night, and we'll work on your skills." His head dropped back into the bush. After what seemed like 100 pats on the back and high fives, I finally arrived at Arts and Crafts. I had just started the class the week before. Allison told me to sign up for it. While I loved going to art museums back in New York City with Aunt Evelyn and my parents, I wasn't the most skilled at putting together little crafts that Sunshine, the art counselor, had waiting for me. This didn't matter much, since Sunshine spent most of the time weaving flowers in her hair and smiling. I sat down next to Allison, feeling nervous and stressed out. I definitely wasn't in the mood to be creative, with so much riding on me. Allison looked like she wanted to talk. She was just opening her mouth when Sunshine stepped out of the shed. Only it wasn't Sunshine. "I don't believe it," I began to mutter. "Believe it, mister," Mrs. Lutchcrout said. "I'm keeping a close eye on you and your inevitable mischief." She leaned down above me as she said it, and we held each other's gaze until the prolonged sight of her awful face made me queasy. I looked down and she announced, "Good morning, boys and girls. I'm afraid Sunshine has taken ill. My name is Mrs. Lutchcrout. I thought I'd fill in, as I have been a teacher for some years. Now today, you may make either a clay sculpture or an architectural design out of popsicle sticks. Rodney, after looking at last week's attempt at creating a mosaic, let me suggest you stick to clay." Allison turned to me. "I heard all about the canoe race. I also heard you had to pick a girl to join you. So, who are you picking?" Allison, who was usually so calm and cool, looked unusually eager. I could see a problem looming. I began, "Well, I just want you to understand that I know how important winning is, and I want you to know I'm ready." Are you a good canoeer?" I asked, squeezing some clay. "My grandpa has one in his garage." "Have you ever been in it?" "The garage?" "No, the canoe." "Not really." "How about another canoe?" "No." "A kayak?" "No." "A rowboat?" "No." "Have you ever been in a boat?" "Of course, Rodney. My family took a Disney cruise last winter." "You realize a cruise ship is a little bigger than a canoe, right?" "Duh, Rodney. What's that got to do with anything?" Why couldn't the girl I found myself liking more and more be the boating expert? I doubted asking Tabitha would help my relationship with Allison, and thinking about of girl problems, I cringed as I remembered hanging up on Jessica the other night at the Periwinkles. Nothing was going right. Can you at least swim? I asked. Of course I can swim. Rodney, I even won a race at swimming last week. Finally, some good news. Having a fast swimmer in the boat could be important. I felt more hopeful as I pictured her freestyling across the water. What stroke did you win? Doggy paddle? Yeah, I missed that stroke in the last Olympics. My brief feeling of optimism left me like air rushing from a deflating balloon. How about I talk it over with Josh and let you know later? She seemed to accept that. Happy to avoid continuing the conversation, I worked on my sculpture of a cobra and thought about all the mounting pressures facing me. A little later, Mrs. Lutzkraut strolled by. Let me see what you've managed for us today, Rodney. I had rolled coils of clay together into a spiral that looked like a snake getting ready to strike. And what is that? She asked. A snake. A snake? It looks like something my neighbor's dog leaves on the lawn. For that revolting little creation, you can clean up today's mess. Everyone else, off you go to your next activity. The group dispersed. Allison lingered to help me, but Mrs. Lutzkraut shooed her away. Under my old teacher's amused, evil eye, I scrambled to pick everything up. I jammed the popsicle sticks and glue sticks into boxes to carry to the shed. One glue stick rolled off the table. As I bent down to get it, Mrs. Lutzkraut announced, You know, Rodney, when we start building here, we're going to make an exclusive private school for the Dry Lake condo community. She was sitting in a chair, fanning herself. I stuck the glue stick in my pocket and turned to face her. What makes you think you're going to start building? This camp is going to stay the way it is. She ignored my comment and asked, Do you think I should make myself principal for the new school? What would you think of that? I've always thought you'd make an excellent warden, I answered, stuffing a pair of scissors back into their holster. That's right. Keep those fresh comments coming. I'm going to take enormous satisfaction the rest of my years knowing that my life's greatest victory and most profitable moments came with your defeat. This weekend will be such fun, I can hardly wait. She glanced at her watch. I need to go meet with the architects. Off you go, run along. She didn't need to tell me twice. Normally, I wouldn't be in a rush to get to my second activity with cramps, but I knew Tabitha would be walking there too, and I needed to speak with her. I realized that this might mean an end with Allison, but I also knew Periwinkle was right. She was the most talented boater in camp. I scrambled along quickly, trying not to attract attention from my new fans. I spotted her walking on the other side of the softball field in the direction of the volleyball courts, where Mr. Cramps waited. I whistled. Her head turned, and she started to make her way across the field toward me. Her long brown hair blew in the hot summer sun, and I felt a strong need to make a good impression. I pushed my hair down, smelled my breath, and felt around in my pocket for the lip balm stick my mom had packed. I pulled it out and rubbed it across my lips as Tabitha gave me a little wave. It took a couple of minutes for us to meet in center field. She was the first to speak. I thought I'd be hearing from you today, she said. Did you know that Todd was waiting for me outside my cabin this morning? He asked me to join his canoe team. I didn't like where this was going. I was worried. Was I already too late? I also began to worry about an odd tingling sensation on my lips. She kept talking. I told him I'd think about it. But the truth is I'm not sure yet. So why'd you whistle? Do you have something to ask me? Her smile told me I had a chance. Well, she couldn't have made this any easier, I thought to myself. I went to open my mouth to invite her on the team, but I just couldn't do it. It wasn't that I lost my nerve. My lips were actually sealed shut. Was all I could utter. You're eating something tasty? She looked confused. This time I was waving my hands in the air and jumping up and down. Her face went from confused to angry. How rude! I turned Todd down because I figured I would be on your team, and now you stand there acting like an ape? I pointed to my mouth. Then I grabbed my lips with my hands and pulled. They wouldn't budge. Tabitha didn't wait while I struggled. She made a look of disgust and shouted, "You're a weirdo! What did I see in you? I'm joining Todd's team." My lips finally ripped open. The pain was immense. "Ah!" I yelled. My eyes welled up with tears, making it difficult to see. The one thing I noticed was Tabitha moving rapidly away. That was bad enough, but I apparently had even worse things to deal with. What was wrong with me? Did I have lockjaw? I remembered the lip balm. What had my mom given me? I yanked it out of my pocket and read the label. Old Horse Super Strong Glue Stick. I had grabbed it while cleaning up for Lootskraut. There was no way she could have known. Or could she? Either way, the outcome was the same. My team's odds of beating the Algonquins had now dropped from bad to impossible. By the time dinner rolled around, I was feeling almost numb, like a prisoner, resigned to his fate. The weekend's race would be a disaster, and I was on the way to my last meal. Two people waited for me by the dining hall entrance. Periwinkle spoke first. "Did you get her? Did you get Tabitha?" He looked eager, but at the mention of Tabitha's name, the other person frowned. I looked over at Tabitha. Her beautiful eyes looked into mine, and I suddenly felt happy. "I was lucky enough to get someone better," I explained. "Really? Who?" Mr. Periwinkle asked. "Mr. Periwinkle, this is Allison. She's completing the dream team." Allison tried hard to conceal her smile, but you could tell it was just the news she was waiting for. "Thanks, Captain," she whispered. "Well now, Allison," Mr. Periwinkle asked as he turned to enter the dining room, "tell me about your paddling experience." "Actually," she answered proudly, "I just won a paddle race last week." "Really?" Mr. Periwinkle clapped his hands together and beamed at me. "Well done, Rodney. I knew you'd come through." And that's all for today.